Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU, calls off 5-week strike.
The National Executive Council of ASU has agreed to conditionally suspend the ongoing strike action.
Vice President Oshibajo receives investors, reiterates government's commitment to implement new development agenda for Niger Delta.
Chief Justice of Nigeria calls for obedience to court judgment as Supreme Court commences new legal year.
On Good Morning Nigeria this Tuesday, we will look at Nigeria at 72nd session of the United Nations General Assembly, plus proscription of hip-hop activities by Southeast governors.
Now, for 2 weeks, leaders across the globe will be deliberating on issues pertaining to social, economic, and political development at the 72nd session of the United Nations General Assembly.
Well, the Assembly is one of the largest gatherings of world leaders where issues of development, peace, and security are canvassed by various countries.
Well, you're right. This year's event is no different, especially with the theme focusing on people striving for peace and decent life for all on a sustainable planet.
And for Nigeria, the 2017 UNGA, that's the United Nations General Assembly, provides a high-level window of opportunity to advance Nigeria's actions towards the implementation of Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. And Blessing, you will recall that Nigeria was unable to attain the MDGs at the 2015 deadline. Let's see what will happen this time around.
Well, they're pushing on all sides now to see these Sustainable Development Goals will work out for them. Well, little wonder that Nigeria's delegation is being led by the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Muhammadu Buhari, who will present the country's agenda at the session.
Now, the President is expected to be among the first 7 world leaders to address this session today to roll out Nigeria's agenda.
And part of the agenda to be pursued by the Nigerian delegation includes support for the repatriation of looted funds to the countries of origin, where some of these funds have been stashed. Well, renewed calls for international support for the release of Chibok girls, as well as eradicating terrorism, and also the comprehensive reform of the United Nations, particularly where we've been seeking for at least a seat at the Security Council to reflect that equitable and fair representation, amongst other things.
Now, Blessing, that is not the only issue for discuss on the program. We also will take a look at the proscription of activities of indigenous people of Biafra, hip-hop, by the Southeast governors.
Well said. It's a 2-part to our conversation today, so we hope you'll stay tuned from now till the end of the program. This is Good Morning Nigeria, and we welcome you. My name is Blessing Abu. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the program.
And I am Kirian Umaya. Good to have you join us on the program this Tuesday, coming to you live from the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, the NTA. And in addition, we shall bring to you our companion segments, which of course will include newspaper review, business, sports, foreign, and entertainment news. And now we are starting off with Anne Jibuno's news for this morning.
Good morning, Kirian, and Blessing.
Good morning, Anne.
Good morning, Nigeria. Here's the day's news. Members of the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU, have been directed to resume work on Tuesday, the 19th of September, as the National Executive Council of the union called off its 5-week-old strike. The decision to call off the strike was premised on the satisfaction expressed by ASU after its last meeting with the federal government, where all grey areas that led to the strike were sorted out.
You watched all of us sign the document, and this is a document that is distilled from the various meetings, various conciliation meetings. We're happy to announce that we understood ourselves and agreed on many, many issues in the spirit of give and take.
The National Executive Council of ASU has agreed to conditionally suspend the ongoing strike action, taking into cognizance that the latest proposal from government to address the contending issues in the strike action has a deadline of the end of October 2017. So, all members of ASU are to resume work after their branch congresses.
Vice President Yemi Osinbajo has reiterated the commitment and resolve of the Buhari administration to actively implement a new development agenda for the Niger Delta region. The Vice President stated this while interacting with a group of foreign investors who paid him a courtesy visit.
These investors visit Nigeria once a year to look at opportunities that exist in our country, so they may take those opportunities.
A new legal year has commenced for the Supreme Court of Nigeria, with the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Walter Onogen, calling for the pronouncement of the nation's courts to be respected and complied with.
Again, the pronouncements of every court ought to be firmly enforced and complied with, without exception. I encourage members of the public to cut off the supply side of corruption by stopping the offering of bribes to judicial officers.
The federal government says the IPOB is using fake videos for mass killings harvested from other parts of Africa and doctored to look current to mislead the international community of ongoing genocide in the country to win their support. Information and Culture Minister Lai Mohammed stated this when he addressed online publishers in Lagos.
There is nothing like genocide anywhere in our country today. What we have in the southeast is a clampdown on a band of lawless people who have no regard for the laws of the land. Those who argue against this should mention just one country where an organization has set up paramilitary and paramilitary organizations, confronted the national army, and engaged in extorting the people without consequences.
The Northern Governors Forum has called for peaceful coexistence among Nigerians, irrespective of ethnic or religious affiliations. Governor of Borno State, Kashim Shettima, made the call when he led some members of the forum to Rivers State Government House on a courtesy visit.
All the measures that you took, particularly your statewide address, will restore hope in the minds of some troubled Nigerians resident in Rivers State.
I will not, as a governor, sitting here to allow any group of persons to intimidate, molest any other person for the sake of one thing or the other.
The need for regular improvement on the existing capacity of the Nigerian army to be combat ready to deal with present and future security threats has been identified as imperative. This was by the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, at the combined Chief of Army Staff's second and third conference in Abuja.
It's intended to ensure a seamless connection between the ends, the ways and means of tackling insecurity, as the Nigerian Army continues to be the pride of the nation in safeguarding our territorial integrity.
And the Nigerian police force has inaugurated community policing strategic guidelines to effectively create new partnerships and processes with a view to reducing crime and antisocial behavior in the country. Inspector General of Police Ibrahim Idris made the presentation at the public launch of community policing re-engagement in Abuja.
So far, we have been successful to some extent in reducing these threats. But with the relaunch of all this all-encompassing community policing strategy, we shall develop a better interactive relationship that will lead to improved support and cooperation of our various stakeholders.
That's the news for now. Good morning, Nigeria. We'll be back with Kieran and Blessing after this break.
From 1967 to 1970, Nigeria went through a horrifying civil war. It didn't matter who was wrong or right. Everybody suffered. Those who fought that war say it should never happen again.
So a lot of people will say, but you were leading the first one. Yes, I led the first one. I don't think a second one is necessary. We should have learned from that first one. Otherwise, the dead would have been to no avail, could all have been in vain.
The words of our elders are full of wisdom.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the daring and invincible Louis the Mosquito. Responsible for 200 malaria cases all on its own. Is there anything that can kill Louis? Morphine! Presenting Mortise Power Guard. Its powerful formula kills malaria mosquitoes fast. So, get Mortise Power Guard.
Whenever pain occurs, you want quick relief. Try new Nurofen Express. It goes to the source of pain and gets to work in under 15 minutes. That's why Nurofen Express delivers fast and effective relief. New Nurofen Express works at the source of pain, fast.
Being a mom is great, but when your child has a fever, you don't know what to do. I trust Nurofen for Children to take care of my child's pain and fever.
Effective relief you can trust.
Hold it! Me! I don't come out my hand from oil bunkering. General, what you gonna yarn? What did the yarn say? I don't understand though. Because they spoil our water and our environment. And they cause our people serious harm. Militancy said, you know good. Me! I not do again Sam. Because why? Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
The Love Your House girl.
These girls out there gunning for Miss World. Who among them is as beautiful as you are?
They lure her out into a worse fate.
Free your mind, settle your mind.
They are only confident enough to woo house girls. They prowl like animals of prey. Sometimes they even get her to betray and lie against her oga or madam, or even harm the family she lives in. But what is their motive? Passion, love, affection, or keep a date with your rib-cracking comedy, Professor John Bull, this week in the episode titled House Girl Warrior.
Look at me, there's no space here anymore. If you're looking for your own wife, go elsewhere and find a wife.
Yeah. You was not hear what I am talking. I was not your wife's.
Yeah. Go.
Over and out.
Royals, sir.
Brought to you by Glow.
The largest data network, Glow Unlimited.
The program is Good Morning Nigeria. Let's take a look at some business stories. Economic Observer applauds federal government over concessioning of major airports in the country. For details of this as well as other business stories, let's join Joy Uzo as our guide.
Hello and a warm welcome to Business News. The 72nd session of the United Nations General Assembly is underway in New York. Top on the agenda is the assessment of the Sustainable Development Goals and other humanitarian issues. Nigeria has scheduled a list of side events to showcase the country's investment opportunities to delegates. Nigeria will be able to feed herself and become a valuable source of nutrition for other nations, considering the abundant natural resources she has. Managing Director of the Nigerian Incentive-Based Risk-Sharing System for Agricultural Lending, Mr. Aliu Abdul Hamid, told NTA Business News that lack of bankable proposals have made it difficult for rural farmers to easily access credit, thereby making it difficult for them to produce optimally.
It's difficult for them to be able to access formal finance and formal market and formal support on their own. An entity like NASAL has to step in, leverage our resources, and do the organizing, the structuring, and the aggregation.
Moving on now, an economic observer has applauded the federal government over the concessioning of the Murtala Mohammed Airport, Lagos, and the Nnamdi Azikiwe Airport, Abuja, saying the move will provide incentives for private investment in the nation's aviation sector. Speaking to journalists shortly after the Vice President Yemi Osinbajo made the declaration at the 5th Quarterly Presidential Business Forum recently held in Abuja, Ambassador Aisha Emeje said concessioning of the nation's major airports would not only increase government revenue in the medium term, but enhance their efficiency and operations.
Also, I'm so happy about the way he's addressing power. We cannot do it wholesomely. We have tried and failed. So he's taking it step by step, improving solar and getting more inclusiveness in people to participate in improving power in the nation.
Equities market opened the week on a negative note as the NSE All-Share Index depreciated by 0.38% to close at 34,873.07 basis points. We now bring you a graphic summary of the closing figures. That's it on Business News. I am Joy Uzo.
Thank you, Joy, for that business report. Newspaper review is up ahead on Good Morning Nigeria.
I'd like to welcome Bayo Atoyebu to the studio this morning. He's ready to do his beat. Good morning. It's
good
time
morning.
to take a look at what the papers are saying.
Yes, good morning, Kyria, and good morning, Nigeria.
Welcome to the program. All right, now let's begin with the Vanguard. We've not had this paper in a while now, but today it has so many striking stories. And above the nameplate, we have stories on strike action. DSS meets ULC leaders as federal government plans meeting with Nupeng today. It's on page 8 of Vanguard. Then ASU suspends strike on page 9. We also seen that in our news beat. And now recall, INEC seeks leave of court to drop petition at Melaye's doorsteps. That story is also on page 8. And now the boss, the Nigerian advertising has evolved considerably, says Shei Tinubu on page 38. Now below the nameplate, the main headline this morning on Vanguard, why Army can't declare APOB terror group, says Saraki, the Senate president, with 4 riders. Southeast governors can't kill Biafra, says APOB. Buratai, the federal government has final say on whether APOB is a terror group or not. Northern governors embark on peace mission to Southeast and South-South. And then AGF, that's the Attorney General of the Federation, initiates court process today to ban APOB. Now, the photograph here shows the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Toko Buratai, inspecting an armored vehicle upgraded by the Nigerian Army during the Chief of Army Staff's combined second and third quarter conferences in Abuja yesterday. And now below that, well, the CJN sets up special courts, judges for alleged looters. With a rider, SANS, other lawyers to face sanctions for trial delays. We also have National Assembly may halt presidency's bid to present 2018 budget. That's on page 9 of the Vanguard. And then Patience Jonathan to appear before Reps Committee today on page 12. Now, there's a question here at the foot of the National Vanguard. Can our politicians save Nigeria? Listen.
Okay, quickly, some of the stories that you read out from the Vanguard on the same pages, our front pages too, for Daily Trust as well as the leadership. I'll start with that of the Daily Trust. Leading for the Daily Trust, terrorism, federal government to decide Kanu's fate. This is coming from Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant Buratai. Hip-hop designation illegal. This is coming from the Senate President, Bukola Saraki. Another rider, Northern governors visit Southeast. But just above that, the story of the Chief Justice of Nigeria setting up special courts for corruption cases you find on page 3. But beside that, you have the story on manufacturers as well as consumers rejecting electricity tariff review. More details on page 13. Moving further down the paper, gunman kill businessman, abducts wife. Details on page 7. And business 1.162 billion naira fraud, ex-AGF Agabi, now Dariye's lawyer. More details on page 8. So still on the military operations, you have that's leading for leadership this morning. Military operations in Southeast constitutional. This is coming from the army now. More details on page 6, but there are 2 riders to that. Saraki faults hip-hop's prescription, insist on due process. Northern governors visit Southeast, South-South on peace mission. And lawyers urge federal government to go hard on agitators as well as terrorists. And police arraigned 67 members of hip-hop members in Abuja. More details, like I said, on page 6. Bayo.
Yes, let's start with the Chief Justice of the Federation. He has ordered the heads of courts to compile and forward to his office all lists of corruption and financial crime cases within their jurisdiction. He has also directed that they should isolate 1 or 2 courts as special courts for speedy determination of all cases related to corruption and financial crime. He has also announced a pegging of representation in all legal cases not exceeding 5 lawyers. This happened while they were swearing in 29 new silk senior advocates of Nigeria. Meanwhile, coming to the IPOP story that has dominated all the papers, the Senate Presidency's Nigerian military declaration of IPOP as a terrorist organization is unconstitutional. And he says, similarly, the ban placed on the same group by Southeast governors it did not follow due process. However, the Chief Whip of the House of Representatives, Honorable Alassane Dogua, says that the Senate President position is mere political statement and it portrays the Senate President as a controversial leader. They all expanded their position. Dr. Saraki says, our laws make clear provisions for taking such actions, and without the due process followed, such declarations cannot have effect. Honorable Ali Dogua also says the Senate President expressed his personal opinion, and it is not a good one for that matter. The Eastern State governors who proscribe the group are the ones who are bereaved, and the Senate President cannot cry more than the bereaved. He said the nationalistic conduct of the Northern governors to promptly stop reprisals in their domain is something that had to be commended. Therefore, the statement of the Senate President was rather unnecessary. Meanwhile, the Chief of Army Staff has also, while inaugurating the Operation Python Dance, made pronouncement. He said what the Defense Headquarters said was a pronouncement, not a declaration. He said this has given room for the appropriate steps to be taken. I think governors are doing the right thing. It is not that we have overstretched our bounds. No, we are still within the limits of the law. Now, what is terrorism? Terrorism is a term that is used to describe violence or other harmful acts committed against civilian groups or for political, nationalistic, or religious goals. It is usually intended to supplant an existing political structure and cause capitulation. United States government simply describe terrorism as simply as an intimidation of civilian population, and it is the influence of government policy by coercion or fear. Now, what does our law in Nigeria say? The position of the law is that there is a Terrorism Prevention Act number 10 of 2011 that was also amended in 2013. And Section 2(1)G says a judge of the Federal High Court in chambers may, on application by Attorney General of the Federation, National Security Advisor, or Inspector General of Police, on the approval of the President, declare an entity to be proscribed. Notice to this effect should be published in the National Gazette.
So now, is this a constitutional right or not?
Now, under the law, the National Security Advisor coordinates, and it is all security agencies. That covers the Attorney General, of the Inspector General of Police, and National Security Advisor. The Attorney General's role is to implement and administer the law.
So does this mean that the governors of the southeastern states do not have the power, to do that?
Well, it's neither here or there. And in fact, there has been also a judicial pronouncement similar to this. In Dokubo Asari versus Federal Republic of Nigeria, Chief Justice of Nigeria, as he then was, Justice Mohammed, in 2007 said, where national security is threatened or there is a real likelihood of its being threatened, human rights or individual rights must be suspended until national security can be protected and taken care of. So those who are saying that to prescribe it is interfering with freedom of association or fundamental human rights, there's a conflict of national security and human rights.
Now, well, the new legal year have just commenced, so we'll see that the people will get to the court to see the process in place.
What will impress Nigerians most this morning, if I'm right, is the issue of instituting special courts to handle corrupt cases, because corrupt cases have lingered in this country for some over 10 to 20 years, right? Isn't that a move in the right direction?
I think I agree with you. It's a move in the right direction, but it is half of the measures. You recall that most corrupt cases suffer defeat at the court because of improper investigation. Sometimes you go to court and then seek permission before you investigate. And that is why the Chief Justice of Federation say, in the court of law, there's never a draw case. You either win or you lose. Anyway, so it behoves on those who are prosecuting to make sure that they get their facts
right and be thorough in the investigation.
A solid case.
All right, so Punch, I think you have the Punch to read.
Punch newspaper. Okay, let's get Punch newspaper now and see some of the stories trending in the front page of that newspaper. I could see above the nameplate, CJN orders chief judges to create special courts for corruption and financial crimes. We've also read that in some other newspapers. It's on page 9 of Punch newspaper. And then CBN threatens to punish banks for forex infractions. And that's on page 25. That's where you get that story. And illegal dollar evacuation to Dubai threatens Naira stability. Guadabe said that. That's on page 30 of the Punch. Now, the main story, the main headline, Reps Chief Whip attacks Saraki for saying APOP ban is illegal. With 2 riders, Northern governors visit Southeast move to stop reprisal, comments Bazu orders that federal government group trade wars over alleged fake videos. Kanu parents whereabout. All right, and now Boko Haram negotiator Mustafa visits UN and all of that. These are stories we find in the foot of the Punch. And now the Tribune newspapers. Let's quickly run through this. Now, at APC General Public Hearing, Southern states insist on fiscal federalism, return to regional government on page 33. 14 years after yellow fever outbreak in Nigeria, girl confirmed positive in Kwara State on page 32. Well, of course, you know about ASU suspending strike on page 7. And, of course, due process not followed in declaring IPOB terrorist group, says Saraki. We've read all that in other newspapers. Blessing?
Well, I think that will be all for this morning. By most of the stories we've looked into.
Yes, it's for the strike. ASU has called off the strike, given a suspension date up to 31st of October. However, United Labour Congress has declared another strike involving Nupeng electricity workers. The NLC, TUC, and the federal government say it is illegal.
Well, that's it for newspaper review this morning. By Atebe, we'll see you again tomorrow.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. A break beckons at this time, and when we return, we'll start off with the first part of the conversation, looking at prescription of hip-hop's activities right there in the country.
Unemployment, notably youth unemployment, features strongly in our party's manifesto. We intend to attack the problem promptly through revival of agriculture.
The 30K is going a long way. Actually, I bought an acre of land for 60K like 2012, and presently I have a cassava farm and a yam farm.
What makes a Nigerian mom powerful?
I encourage my kids to learn new things, and if they get hurt, I rely on the power of my Dettol's One Capful to fight germs.
My family needs protection from germs. I use the power of Dettol's One Capful to disinfect surfaces and clothes.
I trust the power of Dettol's One Capful for bathing. The power of Dettol's One Capful protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs.
Be a powerful Nigerian mom with Dettol.
Hate speech is not a joke. It incites genocide and crimes against humanity. Most of Africa's civil wars are caused by hate speech from one tribe against another. We don't want it here. The Nigerian government stands firm against hate speech.
I was distressed to notice that some of the comments, especially in the social media, have crossed our national red lines by daring to question our collective existence as a nation. This is a step too far.
One nation bound in freedom, peace and unity.
Nigeria, one nation, one people.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria, unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
And in case you've just joined us, this is Good Morning Nigeria on the NTA. Last week, the Southeast governors rose from a crucial meeting in Enugu in which they took a number of decisions pertaining the security situation in the region. One of them is the prescription of the activities of indigenous peoples of Biafra. This development generated reactions and comments by various individuals and groups within and outside the country. And so joining us in the studio this morning to discuss the prescription of IPOB is the Honorable Minister of Information and Culture, Alhaji Lai Mohammed. Thank you, sir, for joining us this morning on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you. Good morning.
And how did you receive the news of a prescription of IPOB? You know, what's your opinion about that decision?
I think there's been much ado about nomenclature and much ado about semantics. What happened, I think, is the governors of the southeastern states simply withdrew any form of recognition from IPOB, and by so doing, cut off the oxygen through which IPOB had been surviving. Now, there's a lot of argument here and there as to the propriety or otherwise, or whether the constitutionality or otherwise. Now, we're dealing with national security. And I don't think governors will fold their arms while the country is about to burn. I've also had a lot of, arguments and comments as to whether the military had the right to declare IPOB a terrorist organization. I think all the military has done, they've catalogued the actions of IPOB and said these acts of IPOB are terrorist acts. Setting up a paramilitary organization, a paramilitary organization, setting up a prior, military organization, such as the Biafran Security Service, the Biafran National Guard, attacking army installations, attacking the army at checkpoints, are acts of terrorists. And that's, I think, what the military has done. Now, all these people who have been arguing one way or the other, I don't think, they think this is a joke. It's not a joke. If, for instance, there has not been this proactive action on the part of the governors of the Southeast and some governors in the northern part of Nigeria, and there has been retaliation, many people were burnt alive in Aba and other places. If the other governors in the northern part of the country and the Southeast had not been proactive in what they did, in the actions they took, what would we be saying today? The whole country will be on fire. There will be retaliation everywhere. And then we'll not be waiting, be talking about semantics, and be talking about, procedure. I think it is from this perspective that we should see what the governors in the Southeast have done and what the military, had done.
All right, Honorable Minister, you addressed a press conference on Sunday, essentially looking at the IPOB's activities, and you have also described that as an orchestrated plan to destabilize the Buhari's administration, present administration. And you also said it's been sponsored by a coalition of disgruntled and frustrated politicians. Why did you describe it as such?
I actually call them association of disgruntled politicians and treasury leaders. You see, it's not by coincidence that the activity of IPOB coincided with the coming into being of this administration. It's also not by coincidence that the activities of IPOB took a new dimension the moment the government went out of recession. But the real question to ask is, what is IPOB asking for?
What are they asking for?
That's the question I'm asking you. Now, from all I have gathered, 80% of the people in the Southeast don't want secession. Ohaneze said so. The governors said so. But this is a government that has come in and has embarked on cleansing the system. Cleansing the system, going after those who have looted our treasury, it's not a tea party. They will also, of course, fight back. And they will use any platform to so do. And we've seen IPOB as one of the platforms that they're using, discredit this government, distract this government, and give the impression to the whole world that the government is doing nothing. You can imagine. It's not a mean feat for any government to get out of recession. But what do we have today? Rather than allowing the government to consolidate on this achievement, all we hear today is IPOB. All we hear today is fake news about genocide. Where is genocide taking place in Nigeria? I'm in Nigeria, you are in Nigeria. We have relations everywhere. Where exactly is genocide taking place in Nigeria? Go to the internet today. The Huffington Post wrote a very scathing editorial, story based on sheer ignorance, based on the powers of fake news, that Christians are being persecuted in Nigeria. Where in Nigeria are Christians being persecuted? Where in Nigeria are Christians being killed? Where in Nigeria are any particular tribe being killed? And you see, we warned the nation about this fake news. A long time ago, nobody took us seriously. That the strategy of the opposition is to embark on fake news. And of course, we live today in an era of, artificial, intelligence.
Social media.
Where I can clone your voice, clone your face, and then put words in your mouth. As we speak today, IPOB has written letters to, many governments outside Nigeria, international parliaments, sending videos of what never happened or what happened in other parts of the world. What happened 10, 20 years ago, and claiming that, look, there's genocide in Nigeria.
But do we have videos of what IPOB activities are, unleashing terror on other members of the society?
And the military.
And the military?
The military, of course, yes. And of course, yes. And the military has catalogued. And the IPOB is yet, to deny. And of course, Nnamdi Kanu was on television saying that he was having a siesta at 4:30 p.m. in Uma here, and the military they were conducting the exercise, and they disturbed his sleep, and his boys stopped them. Which country would accept that kind of nonsense? That you are having your siesta, and then the military is conducting an exercise, and they're disturbing you, and you ask your boys to stop it. It's only in the Banana Republic that you're going to have non-actors, non-state actors that will be doing that kind of thing. You see, it's amazing that it's always people are always very eager to criticize government, put government, to task. But I ask you, anywhere in the world, when you have an organization that sets up its own, security service, sets up its own paramilitary organization, attacks a constituted army, what do you call that organization?
All right, sir. To buttress what you're saying, is there any practical proof of the fact that the IPOB had secret agents or agents, as the case may be?
I don't think you've been watching Nnamdi Kanu. He says it. He has videos about it. He has pictures of their so-called secret service. He has pictures of his paramilitary organization. He goes about the streets, at checkpoints, extorting money from people. He goes, as a matter of fact, I'm even told that they're even by Biafran passports that they issue. So, he has never hidden any of these things.
So all those symbols or different activities are in our own custody for us to present, in order for us not to say, okay, this is fake news or this is fake activities as well.
I'm saying that it's gone beyond that. It's gone beyond that.
What more do we know?
I say it's gone beyond that. Just look, the videos of Nnamdi Kanu saying all kinds of things are available. They're all over the internet.
Honorable Minister, if we now, I asked a question about you describing those behind this orchestrated plots. Do we have names? Do we have faces that have been fingered, that have been identified? And what is the government going to be doing about it instead of unleashing means of punishment on some innocent lives in the clash between?
Such as?
I'm asking you.
No, listen. You see, when an organization like IPOB is being funded, they don't publish where their funding is coming from. Terrorists don't publish where their funding is coming from. But we know the countries that are supporting IPOB.
Which countries are?
I'm not at liberty to disclose them here. We know the source of their funding.
So what are we going to do about that?
We're blocking them. And we are taking a lot of diplomatic actions also in respect of some countries that are supporting them. Many of them are doing so based on ignorance. They have been hoodwinked to believe that, Nigeria is a country where Muslims persecute Christians.
So let's take a look at a fundamental aspect of this conversation. Now, what do you think have been able to or responsible for sustaining the activities of IPOB for a very long time. Is there any kind of philosophy that has refused to die in those who foment trouble using IPOB? Because he's been there for over the years on radio, internet radio, even on TV and what have you. So what will the government be doing to see how it can block all those channels through which
you must understand that the Radio Biafra is an internet-based radio, which is based in London, and I know the government has been talking to the British government on this, but they think it's just part of freedom of expression. So that these diplomatic issues that we are tackling, that you cannot from London be broadcasting to the world and hate news. They say we have no problem with self-determination, but we have problems with the methods that we're employing for so-called self-determination. Self-determination is allowed only when it's not violent. But the moment you start employing violence, it's no longer self-determination. You have crossed the line between self-determination into terrorism.
Okay, sorry, Blessing. Could this step taken by the military declaring IPOB as a terrorist group and the subsequent prescription of its activities by governors, is it not to be seen by the international community as a suppression of their rights?
No, like my question to the international community is that if there's an organization like IPOB in Britain or the US that attacks the British Army, that attacks the UK, the UK Army, the US Army, what would they do? If there's an organization in the US or in Netherlands or in Italy or in Spain that sets up a private organization, its own security service, its own paramilitary, what would they do? That's the question. There's no country in the world who tolerate that kind of situation.
So the activities are actually surpassed self-determination.
Absolutely, that's my position. Do you know how many? I was on the television program yesterday in Lagos, and somebody phoned in from Yobe saying that 2 of his relations were burnt alive.
Did he get a video?
I was a television station. I was on a on a television program. Calling, and the fellow called him from Yobe.
How did he get to know? He was in Yobe while the activity took place, right in the southeast.
Blessing. If you have relations in Ibadan and anything happens to them, how do you know?
No, sir, while we're talking about that, you just said we should take a look at the issue of fake news and some other activities, so it will help the government, help the security, and also help put IPOB where they actually belong.
I think, I don't know whether you are following the news. Yesterday, 7 members of IPOB were charged to court on conspiracy to kill and that kind of thing. It was as a result of what happened in Aba.
All right. Now, the role of the media and of also opinion leaders is very critical in this particular situation that we find ourselves at this point in the nation. What should that role be, and what other messages will you be passing across this morning?
I think if you read the full speech of my text, of my address on Sunday in Lagos, I was particularly, I reserved a whole paragraph to the media, reminding the media that at times like this, when it comes to national security, the media can't afford to sit on the fence. Sure. The media can't afford to do any other thing than to support whatever is going to make us remain one. Now, it's the kind of comments and headlines that have been coming out from certain, section of the media, and the comments of certain commentators that have been giving that oxygen to this kind of groups. You see, when a man knows, clearly, a man who goes to a checkpoint and attacks the military and tries to take the rifles belonging to this military, should know that what he's doing is wrong. But when a senior advocate of Nigeria comes on television and says, actually, what the governors are doing is wrong, it gives a wrong impression. And what that does is that it gives confidence to this group that, after all, what they are doing is not illegal. So all of us, not just the media, all influencers should please show a lot of restraint. This is not a tea party. This is not a joke. The only reason why we can all practice our professions, the only reason why we can be here today and be talking to Nigeria is because there's peace in Nigeria. If there's no peace in Nigeria, there'll be no NTA, there'll be no media. And we hope that all our commentators, either on radio or television or newspapers, will appreciate this.
Even on social media, because that's where, in fact, you need to read by the minutes what is happening.
Of course. You see, if you read what is happening in social media, you think you are talking about another country apart from Nigeria. You actually think that Nigeria is at war. Why is not at war? You see, and this is why I also appeal to all these international communities. And you have your embassies here. Please do more due diligence before you make pronouncements that are capable of further inflaming the situation.
In fact, that would have been the next question from me, but I'd like you to solidify this approach now. What would you be telling the international community? Because you have posited that IPOB has some international connections. There are nations that are backing them up, and they could also be sponsoring them, so to speak. So how would you address the international community on concrete terms?
Well, I think I would tell them very bluntly that you stop, adopting double standards. What they cannot accept in their own countries, they should not, tolerate it. They should not, they should take on the same standard as in their own country. Two, I will ask them that they should please show more restraint. They have access to government. They can investigate issues going on in Nigeria. They have embassies in Nigeria. They can go to any minister, they can go to government and ask for specific things. But essentially, some of the governments, like Turkey, had denounced the man that made this disparaging remark about Nigeria. But I would want to appeal to them to show more restraint and to please, before they go out to issue this kind of statements, clarify from government. Nigeria is an open society. There is nowhere they cannot access in Nigeria. So in fact, today with the with telecommunications and with technology, there's nothing happening anywhere in Nigeria that anybody cannot go to or do not know. Somebody asked me yesterday, where is Nnamdi Kanu? And I said, Nnamdi Kanu, if he's with government, he will tell the world he's with us. It's not with us. We don't know where he is.
So till now, nobody knows where Nnamdi Kanu is?
Look, Nnamdi Kanu has simply gone into hiding, and just to heighten the tension that he's either been kidnapped or is being held somewhere. If we have him, we'll let the world know we have him. Why not?
Now, what you now have on your hands are IPOB members and their supporters and other people who are sympathetic to their cause. Now, something must have pushed them to the state. Earlier on, you said you don't actually know what they want.
Look, you see, I ask you, what pushed Boko Haram supporters and followers to a level whereby they donate their daughters for suicide bombing? So, you see, anywhere in the world and any time in history, you will have fringe organizations, whether religiously, whether politically. That's the human nature. Every time, everywhere. Go to Uganda. Is it they call it the people? Is it the Lord's Army? It's been there for how many years? And still today, he has followership.
So what is your message to IPOB members, the supporters, and anyone who is already still being sympathetic to their cause, for them to actually? take a turn from what
my message to them is
what
that,
is Nigeria's message to them?
My message to them is that, look, whatever might be their grievances, they will not achieve it by being violent. At times, it amazes me that we hear one group saying they're marginalized. If we are to say, oh, this group is marginalized, and you ask them, what is the base of your marginalization? They will take part of a whole to make it a whole. I ask them, I say, good. If we want to really resolve, if we want to look at this issue of marginalization, let's have the complete picture.
Okay, so the push for this is marginalization.
They claim it's marginalization, which I don't think they've been able to prove. And even if it is true, the way to resolve it is not by violence.
So, all right, sir. Now, what is the role of politicians in this connection? You know, people who are in positions of authority. What should be their take in this? Should they play any role in resolving the entire thing? Because from the way it is going, the IPOP supporters are not giving in. Because, like I was saying initially, that it has some philosophical undertones, you know, that it's difficult to clean out. You know, if you speak to some of them, it's burning in them. Is there any way politicians could help to cushion, you know, the activities, the effect of what already has happened, you know, and see how we can, you know, take it from there? Yes, remedy the situation.
You see, until you know what people are complaining about, and they bring them about in a very decent manner, in a manner you can, you know, you can recognize, then there's no way, there's nothing you can do about it. But you see, as I speak today, when I go on the internet often, and I listen to the pronouncements of Nnamdi Kanu, and clearly it's not about marginalization.
So what is it?
Honestly, if I tell you the kind of things Nnamdi Kanu has been saying on the internet, you begin to ask yourself, what actually is his mission? And you see, the fact that the 5 governors of the southeastern states have decided to withdraw their support and recognition from IPOP says a lot. Who then is he representing? What is he representing? You see, people have different reasons for doing what they are doing. And most times they do it because they can get away with it.
All right, sir. At this point, we need to thank you immensely for making yourself available to us this morning to explain the situation. African money Nigerians is not clearer now, you know, government position in this situation. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister of Information and Culture, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, for being part of Good Morning Nigeria for today. You have made our day for being here this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
And this is a Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. We'll take a short break now. When we return, the program continues with the second leg of our conversation.
Another edition of TV Guide magazine is out with revealing accounts of trending stories. With the dwindling oil revenue, he says there is no reason to worry.
We strongly believe that culture is Nigerians' new oil. And we're going to show that by creating wealth, our art and culture will be a statement for all of us.
Our cover story is on Otumba Olusegun Munchewe, Director General, National Council for Arts and Culture. For upcoming TV presenters, Elegant Elizabeth Banu tells you what it takes. A peep into the activities of the Presidential Committee on the Northeast Initiative, a mandate being fulfilled. A trip to the Yankari Games Reserve at Safari in Bauchi State brings you closer to nature. And the Oshun Osogbo Festival, our culture, our pride. Professor Adiku, the Vice Chancellor, University of Abuja, tells us what it means to manage a university, plus our regular features, star profile, media issues, relationships, young minds, entertainment, sports, and lots more. Pick your copy now at the vendors or at every NTA station nationwide. TV Guide, still your indispensable companion.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, and the second part of our conversation this morning is taking a look at the ongoing United Nations General Assembly. Now, President Muhammadu Buhari will today address the 72nd session of the United Nations General Assembly, in which he is expected to present Nigeria's agenda. Oyeyemi Ajayi put together this report to kickstart our discussion.
On the 17th September 2017, the Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari stepped out of the country to participate in the 72nd United Nations General Assembly meeting, which has the theme focusing on people striving for peace and decent life for a sustainable planet. The president is leading a delegation consisting of some governors and ministers with an agenda to project Nigeria's roadmap to 2030 SDGs, raise issues of terrorism, gender-based violence and corruption, including the repatriation of stolen funds, as well as robust engagement with the international community and showcasing Nigeria to the world for foreign investment.
We're particularly keen on the issues of the illicit flow of funds. That comes within our anti-corruption drive, and what we're particularly going to be pushing, and Norway is supporting us on that, is getting the international community to really make more of an effort in the repatriation of stolen loot.
The trend in the world is that nobody goes it alone again. Therefore, if it brings the Nigerian condition to the international public, wherever they can help, they will help. This is a global platform. You don't have it bigger than this one. And for us as Nigerians, the fact that our president is here in person is a big, big, big achievement.
The relevance of Nigeria to the continent and to the world is well known.
This is the third time President Muhammadu Buhari is attending the United Nations meeting, and he will be among the first 10 world leaders to address the session. Of major importance to be brought to the table is the reform of the United Nations, especially the expansion of membership of the Security Council, which is perceived as a way to properly represent Africa at the highest level of decision-making in the world. So far, South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt, Libya and Senegal have indicated interest. Many have, however, described Nigeria as a better choice since she is the most populous black nation in the world. This therefore implies that attaining a seat on the council places her on the best pedestal to properly represent the continent on the global scene. In addition to Nigeria's population is the country's representation at the non-permanent category, which was adjudged very significant.
And thank you, Oyemi, for that background report. And we are now being joined in the studio by Ambassador Joe Keshi, former Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He is reaching us from our Benin Network Center. Thank you, Ambassador Keshi, for joining us this morning on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you.
Right, we also have another diplomat here with us in the studio in Abuja, Ambassador Usman Saraki, former Deputy Permanent Representative of Nigeria to the United Nations, 2012 to 2016. It's good to have you on our show this morning.
Thank you.
And seated by my right here is Professor Oshita Abu. Oshita Abu is a, well, professor of international politics, international relations, based university. It's a pleasure to have you join us on the program.
Thank you very much.
He's a professor of international relations. You're all welcome to the program.
All right, thank you very much, Kirian, gentlemen ambassadors, and also Professor Abu. Let's establish the fact that, okay, having an understanding on the significance of why leaders, really, of countries will have to come each year to United Nations General Assembly to present addresses, and also the desire, the direction to nations, whether locally or internationally. Ambassador Usman Saraki.
Thank you. Good morning. Well, as you know, the United Nations is the primary global institution, the multilateral institution. And the General Assembly, particularly the high-level segment, is where heads of state and government assemble and address the whole world. And their meeting, their address sets the tone for the preceding or the succeeding, I should say, deliberations in the United Nations. So it's all about the rule of law at the global and national levels. Heads of state meet to speak, to project their national positions on key global issues like peace and security, human rights, sustainable development, and emerging issues like migration, climate change, terrorism, conflict resolutions, and so forth. So it is very crucial that heads of state address the General Assembly in order for them to convey a sense of commitment to the Charter of the United Nations and to collectively agree deliberations and outcomes of their diplomats, be they in New York or Geneva or Brussels or Addis Ababa, in order to convey, as I said, this commitment to preserve world peace. So the attendance of heads of state and government at deliberations in the General Assembly is very critical and important as key component of global governance.
All right, well, before we take on the professor here, let's seek the view from Ambassador Joe Keshi, who's already introduced from our Benin Network Center. Ambassador Joe Keshi, this is not the first time Nigeria, of course, will be there to actually present its own desire. How have you been able to follow up on this commitment to actually projecting our nation?
Well, as Ambassador Sonny has said, I think it's a good thing that the Nigerian president is there this time. I mean, it's a very timely occasion for him, given the fact that in the last couple of months, really, Nigeria's voice has been lost in the international community. So for the president to appear using this global platform to restate Nigerians' views on a number of issues and state out our own positions on them, I think it's a good omen, you know, a good omen for us, because it gives him the opportunity not just to express Nigerians' position on a number of global issues today, particularly on the more current issues like Korea, the crisis in the Middle East and elsewhere, and of course our own security issues. So when you see heads of states that you do not often hear their voices, the voices of the dominant powers are what you hear all the time. So the United Nations General Assembly at this point in time allow heads of states to really lay out their own positions and of course the agenda of their own respective government. So I just think that it's, to start with, it's a good thing the president is there, but the most important and critical thing is what exactly the president will say in relationship to some of these, dominant issues and Nigeria's position.
All right, thank you. Back to the studio here. Professor Abu, you know, you've listened to Ambassador Keshi and, of course, Ambassador Usman Saraki here, talking about the essence of addressing the world through UN General Assembly. And Ambassador Keshi also noted that Nigeria has been lost, somehow in the international community, and that President's speech today at the General Assembly will bring back Nigeria to the international community. In your view, what does it portend for Nigeria?
Yeah, thank you very much. Your Excellencies have spoken very well about the need to be on the global platform in New York. Rightly said, for some time Nigeria has been rather out of the picture in terms of showing both regional and continental leadership. And it is very important that by His grace, Mr. President is able to be in New York to project Nigeria's positions, Nigeria's interests, and let the world know that Nigeria is still capable of championing the interests of the peoples of not just the West African region, but the African continent. Like I said, it's a very important forum for us. There are many, many issues that are on the table that Nigeria needs to take leadership of. The AU Agenda 2063, the SDGs, which various countries are working on, as you know, the issues of illicit flow of funds and the repatriation of stolen funds to Nigeria, human rights issues, etc. So quite a number of issues that Nigeria has articulated and taken to New York. I know from experience that in more recent times, the preparation for our representation in New York is much better than it used to be before. The issues are very well debated, articulated at the Foreign Ministry before we go to New York. So I'm sure that Nigeria will be able to make the necessary impact in terms of assuring the international community of our commitment to global universal values and global governance. And universal values is very important.
What you said something about clear objectives of what we want to go present before the world now. Yes, the last outing, 71st UNGA now, how do we do marshalling on some of those things that we have brought before the world? Until now, some of them are actually being represented, as in what will be seen in the 72nd outing. How do we get past just going for going's sake and not actually pressing priorities for us to bring back home and even for the continent?
This is why it is very important that Mr. President is there in person. You tend to make more impact. You tend to get more partnerships because aside from the usual speeches that are made by the heads of state, you also have meetings at the margins. Exactly. And you know rightly that Mr. President is supposed to meet with some other heads of state, including the President of the United States of America. And I'm sure there are issues to be discussed, decisions to be taken, etc., with respect to how we can be able to implement some of the positions that we are taking at the forum.
All right, thank you. Now let's return to Ambassador Usman Saraki, because he has served in the United Nations up to 2016, so he's quite fresh, you know. Now the theme of this year's session, is focusing on people, striving for peace and decent life for all on a sustainable planet. Now, how relevant is this theme to Nigeria as a nation?
Well, it is very relevant, considering the challenges that we face globally in terms of peace and security that impact directly on the dignity of people, on their livelihoods, and on the sustainability of the planet itself. Coupled with that, the challenges faced, that are created by climate change and conflict-induced migrations and so forth. When you reduce them to the national level, you find that in places like the Niger Delta, the impact of exploitation of natural resources in the Lake Chad Basin, climate change and conflict have exacerbated the conditions of people, and a lot of, millions of people have been declared to be in dire situations as IDPs and refugees. So the presence of Mr. President in New York is to give vent, if you like, to these difficulties that are being experienced internally and to engage with other world leaders to focus attention on those critical challenges in Nigeria in order to collectively find solutions to them. No nation can single-handedly find solution to terrorism, for instance, or the issue of climate change, or migration, or for that matter, trafficking in people. So these are issues that are on the table in this 72nd session of the, of the General Assembly. And engagement and advocating of those challenges will lead to some actualization of Mr. President's key agendas when he came to office. His pronouncements on defeating Boko Haram is being given a very fair translation in action with the conduct of our military and the establishment of the multinational joint force, which is a very big diplomatic initiative on the part of Nigeria. Secondly, also, the condition of IDPs and refugees, their return, rehabilitation, and resettlement will require huge commitment. According to the Undersecretary General of the United Nations for Political Affairs, Mr. Jeffrey Feltman, the Northeast alone lost nearly $9 billion to activities related to Boko Haram. A lot of infrastructural damage has been done in the Northeast, and all this will be remedied or addressed by a global consensus around funding, around resettlement of people, around rehabilitation, reconstruction. So the idea that Mr. President's presence there will accelerate and ginger up global support to these initiatives is very important. And that is why I think our foreign policy should be deployed totally unreservedly in order to achieve those outcomes.
All right. Now back to Benin, where we have Ambassador Joe Keshi. Ambassador Keshi, you are former permanent secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we would like to get your perspective with respect to the theme of this year's session.
Obviously, it's a timely theme on the plate of the national, of the international body. Given what is going on around in the world today, where you find that in a number of countries, there's conflict that has affected people in so many ways that we can imagine. Given the fact that in a number of countries also, their economy is failing, that is affecting quite a number of people in so many ways. And the fact that in a number of countries also, some people don't even have an idea what decent living means. And so when the United Nations chooses a theme like that, I guess it's a way of reminding leaders that their primary responsibility is to the people of that country and the people who elected them. The whole essence of governance is the people, is to make the people happy, is to make the people, secured. But when in a number of, quite often, governments in a number of countries fail to realize that the most important assets they have is the people, and that they should focus more in developing the people and making the people happy, secured. The United Nations theme this year, I think, really brings to the fore this issue that, look, it is time government begins to think more of the people. How do you make the people live a happy life, a decent life, and ensure that crisis is reduced, refugees are reduced, migration is handled in a decent manner. So I just think that it's just not only timely. My hope is that a number of world leaders would honestly begin to listen to themselves as well as to the concerns of the people, because there is no nation around the world today where you do not find tremendous amount of dissatisfaction, even in the advanced countries, with their lives, or where they are today. And in our own case, it's virtually the same thing. and with the way the economy is growing that is not inclusive, you find that a number of social issues have also cropped up. And the only way to address them is to focus on the people and the things that touches the people most, especially things like education, like health, good infrastructure that the people can really enjoy in their lifetime. These are some of the critical issues that governments have to address, and why the theme this year is not just timely, but we pray that national leaders will come back energized, fulfilled, and determined to fulfill the aspirations of the people. When you look at it properly, people are not asking too much from government. What is wrong in having good roads? It's what the government should be doing to give people. What is wrong in having hospitals that can attend to the people? What is wrong in promoting an economy that is inclusive, not only for the few? And so it's very timely, and I'm glad that this is the focus of the United Nations this year.
All right, thank you very much, Ambassador Joe Keshi. Professor Abu, you're still with us, and we'll still want to pursue this aspect of the theme, focusing on people. And our president is scheduled to be among the early speakers for today. And does this in any way signify anything special that this scheduling for him to actually speak before the world today?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, the fact that our president is to speak among the first 10 heads of state today is a sign that the international community still recognizes that Nigeria is a very important actor in Africa. And also the fact that the focus is on people and decent living. And of course, you know, we have the issue of globalization, of inequalities, of which Africa is bearing the brunt of this phenomenon. But you find out from our own angle, coming from the Africa and the problems that Africa face, you know, if you don't have peace, you cannot have all these developmental issues we are talking about. And we also know from our studies in international relations that one's foreign policy is as strong as its domestic environment. So there's a limit also to which heads of state can stand before the world and talk about certain issues that they want to implement when the international community looks behind and they find a lot of problem within your country. And so it's important that we're able to juxtapose the domestic environment and what is possible and what is not possible, and then what we tell the international community. What I really want to say is that you have conflict all over the world to different degrees. The difference comes in how you manage the conflict. So when a government manages the conflict the way it should, the problems are resolved easily. But when a government does not manage the conflict the way it should manage the conflict, then you're going to have a lot of problems. And it's going to be very difficult for you to be telling the world one thing and the world is seeing a different thing. So we have articulated what we want to tell the world, but at the same time, Mr. President should be able to assure the world that Nigeria still have the capacity, the capability, and the resources, both human and material, to be able to put its house in order and also be able to project her interests and maintain the peace and stability that we have in the West African region and project it to the African Union.
Still with you, Kirian, you've just touched the issue of security, which is one area Nigeria have been articulating over the years, the aspect of fair representation in the Security Council, and they have all been this request to issue of reforms to actually be a permanent member. Now, the thrust at Milk in Nigeria is speaking for itself, but there are other voices now saying Nigeria is speaking for the continent. What exactly is happening? How do we begin to redirect this policy to have that fair representation that we seek before the UN?
You have spoken rightly. Yes, the issue of reform of the UN is extremely important. Sometimes not just in the Security Council, the whole reform of the UN system, inherited from 1945, and progressively some countries started to wield more powers than other countries. The circumstances of 1945 has changed from the circumstances of 2017. So military capability, etc., should not be part of the most important criterion for deciding who should sit in the Security Council. There are other socio-economic issues and reasons demography, regional influence, etc., that should come into being, and then the commitment and participation in the activities of the United Nations. And in some of these criteria that I've just mentioned, Nigeria has actually excelled. We have taken place in almost all, 80 to 90% of all peacekeeping missions in the world. We have very good credentials with the UN in terms of our commitment, in terms of democracy, demography, in terms of our activities within the region, etc., etc. So there's what they call the Elzowini consensus. Yes, about how many countries should be represented in a reformed UN Security Council. And I think there are 2 or 3 different options, but I think the most popular one is that Africa should have 2 representation on the seat of the Security Council. And then, of course, you've mentioned the issue of Kenya, Senegal, Nigeria, etc., etc. Well, at the end of the day, I think it was left for the African Union to be able to put forward 2 candidates under that consensus to the international community and then for the consideration of the global body. But I think the time is right now for an expansion of the UN Security Council in a way that Africa is represented on the council.
All right, representation. Nigeria has been on this for a while now, in fact, Africa. And I'm talking about reforming of the United Nations to be able to accommodate some other countries who have the prerequisite, to be part of that permanent seat. Now, what's your take on that? I mean, how would Nigeria go about this? Or do you think that we're even in a position? As Professor Abu explained, he wrote out some criteria, that made Nigeria to be qualified to seek for that position. So in your opinion, what are those criteria? And are we really prepared to be on that seat?
Well, Nigeria is actually prepared, and since the liberation efforts of Africa, particularly with the OAU, when we supported the MPLA in Angola, and also our commitment to the liberation of countries in Southern Africa, Mozambique, South Africa, Namibia, and Angola, in those countries, we have signified our commitment, our resolute preparedness to be on the Security Council. And I think that resolution and that commitment has not wavered. On the contrary, our pedigree in the area of peacekeeping, for instance, our pedigree in the area of good governance, respect for the Charter of the United Nations, and even our declaration to abide by the decision of the International Court of Justice with our differences with Cameroon and border settlements makes us a very, very law-abiding country on the global scene. And there are tangible and intangible criteria that countries look for in terms of qualifying for permanent membership and other category, which is non-permanent membership of the United Nations. I want to stress here for the benefit of the viewers that the process of reform of the United Nations is a big basket containing a number of processes. For instance, during Kofi Annan's time, he instituted a commission to look into the larger reform of the United Nations, and they came up with the document In Larger Freedom. And In Larger Freedom recommended a number of steps towards the reform of the whole United Nations. First of all, they called for the abolition of the Commission on Human Rights and the establishment of the Human Rights Commission. And that was done in 2006. To better perfect the mechanism of promotion and protection of human rights around the world. Secondly, they recommended the establishment of the Peace Building Commission to support UN peacekeeping efforts. So the idea is not only to keep the peace, but to build the peace in broken countries and societies. The Peace Building Commission is up and running. The third leg or tire of the reform now is to concentrate on the Security Council. And the Security Council reform has been advocated, if you remember, under the Millennium Declaration in 2005, when heads of states and government reiterated the importance of reforming the UN. And that declaration led to the establishment of certain processes. For instance, the General Assembly adopted Resolution 62557 in 2008, which established 5 zones or 5 areas that need to be looked at in the discussion of the reform. First, the categories of membership that will be reformed or that will be discussed, both the permanent and non-permanent, the expansion. Secondly, the number of countries or the number of new countries that will come in, both in the non-permanent and permanent category, and then the veto power, the question of the veto. And fourthly, the geographical representation. And fifthly, the relationship between the Security Council and the General Assembly, that is, how complementary they will be in terms of upholding of the Charter. Nigeria participated since the beginning of the debate, largely from 1993, when this was advocated by African countries and Commonwealth and non-aligned countries. And we participated in the working group on the question of the reform of the Security Council, and in a process called IGN, Intergovernmental Negotiations on the Reform of the Security Council. We have been very active also in engaging with the L69 group, for instance, and the C10 group, the Committee of 10, established by African heads of state and government to negotiate for Africa as a bloc with the rest of the world. So Nigeria is leading from the front, not from the behind or from the middle in terms of reforming of the council. We come with a very, very highly recognized antecedent, criteria, pedigree, and also qualifications to actually be a permanent member. But what we require is to deploy all our diplomatic and political resource towards attaining this singular objective. That means the concentrated essence of Nigeria's diplomacy must now be deployed towards attaining this very, very singular objective in terms of becoming a member of the permanent category of the United Nations Security Council. And you cannot do so by remaining on your seat. You have to engage. And the presence of Mr. President in New York today is one of these key aspects of engagement.
All right, thank you very much, Ambassador Saraki. Ambassador Joe Keshi, we've listened to some of the points raised by Ambassador Saraki here. What, in your own estimation, have given this faltered situation to previous efforts to actually get us into the Security Council and the fair representation?
I think Ambassador Sonny and Professor Sita have really stated clearly the criteria, the possible criteria that could earn the Nigeria a seat in the United Nations. But I want to warn, if we were to get it, if it was on the basis of population, I think by now we would have secured the seat. If it was on the basis of our participation in the United Nations peacekeeping operations, Senegal and Kenya would not be in the race. If we were to take it from other points of view, I don't think other countries will really challenge us. So we need to bear this in mind when we make these assertions about our population, peacekeeping, which, by the way, I believe we've fallen off the radar in recent times, and we need to we need to recapture our position and probably get back to peacekeeping operations. The point was what the last concluding part of Ambassador Sonny's contribution. Now, that must not be lost on us. We need to put in place a very strong diplomatic footwork to persuade other nations to secure the support of, in particular, the big powers. It's not just to say, recognize us because we are Nigeria, because we are the largest black nation on earth. For goodness sake, that will not get us a seat in the United Nations. We must continuously behave like a responsible member of that nation. We must up our diplomatic practice in order to engage, first of all, within our own region in such a way that we can persuade some of these countries. And I won't say that they are spoilers. They are not spoilers because they also are pushing their own national interests to ensure that we get a continental support. Once we've secured that continental support, the next thing is the support of some of the world, some of the world powers. And all these we've not been able to put together till date. No matter whatever conferences we participate in, what will earn us that seat is the strength of our argument, how we articulate our position, the number of supporters we have, from the region itself. The good thing going for us today is that despite the challenges we face in this country, most of our other competitors are facing similar challenges. If you take Egypt, Egypt's own situation is probably worse than it was a few years ago. Kenya is no better, and South Africa is in the same boat. So what that presents to us is the opportunity to take a second look at our strategy and begin to fine-tune a new strategy that will enable us present a complete new narrative of Nigeria to the international community. And that's where, for me, as a person, I'm really looking out to hear how the Mr. President articulates some of our position and the way he explains some of the things going on, in Nigeria. I heard the Minister of Information just much earlier. I sincerely hope the President departs from some of the things he said. If you talk about the contradictions in Nigeria, our federation is not perfect. But if the President said, look, our federation is not perfect, but I assure you we are working seriously to make it a very strong union, that sends a very good message to the international community, as well as to the domestic audience. Because when a president speaks in an international forum, he has two audiences in mind, the international community and the Nigerian his constituency at home. So my whole prayer today is that when the president speaks, he speaks like a truly Nigerian leader. He speaks like a truly African leader. He speaks like someone that is carrying the burden of the continent as well as that of people who really believe in the theme of the United Nations, with this promise that no matter the challenges, we still remain a strong federation, united in our conviction and prepared to be a responsible member of the international community, to search for peace, to ensure good living for the people, and to make sure that the globe itself is more peaceful than we found it.
It's very interesting analysis there from Ambassador Keshi, diplomatic footwork, the strength of our argument, and the possibility of articulating an argument that the world can listen to from on the part of African leaders. And I want to bring in Professor Abu to speak to that. This also brings up the issue of domesticating UN resolutions. After the talks and you return to your nation and you're not doing anything. But first of all, speak to the fact that Africa needs to articulate an argument that can convince the international community to give us a seat at the United Nations.
Yeah, thank you very much. The fact is that on the issue of reforms, the areas that are easy to address have been addressed in terms of reforms at the United Nations. The singular most difficult area of the reform of the UN system is the United Nations Security Council, the issue of the veto and the representation in the council. And from experience, nobody gives up what he or she has easily. The 5 countries that have veto in the UN, it accrued to them by virtue of the roles they played in the Second World War and during the Cold War, etc., etc. They wouldn't want to lose it easily. And so that means that we have to do exactly what Ambassador Keshi has said. You articulate very well, and you keep mounting the pressure at the right places diplomatically to let them know that there is the need for Africa to be represented in that body. Not in terms of the bygones of military capacity, but in terms of present existential realities of the people all over the world. So if we're able to do that, and of course put our house in a reasonable order, and be bold enough to tell the world exactly what Ambassador Keshi has said. Yes, we may have problems, but yes, we're on top of it, and yes, we are still ready to show leadership. It is just possible that the international community would listen to you.
Is our narrative today showing such concentrated essence, like, let me use the word of Ambassador Saraki here, as well as Ambassador Joe Keshi say, diplomatic footwork? How strong are those policies helping to shape the narratives we have before the world?
Thank you very much. Well, the practitioners know much better how they go about it. But we are outsiders looking in, and probably a lot is being done underground that you and I may not be aware of. But for us who look from outside, it worries us sick, for instance, to hear that Morocco wants to be a member of ECOWAS, for example. And you begin to think of the permutations and ramifications of Morocco up there trying to be a member of ECOWAS here. Why is she trying to do that? Is it to undermine the influence of Nigeria? So we need to do a lot of diplomatic work to make sure that first we still remain very uppermost in the minds of most African countries before we can move to the global scene.
Okay, this issue of discourse this morning is topmost on the mind of our viewers. That's why they've sent in their tweets. You could actually join us as soon as you can. At NTA GMN is the Twitter handle. Now, let's go quickly through some of those ones we have here. Dele Jack Solomon has this tweet. President Muhammadu Buhari and delegation should strive to project Nigeria as a strong moral force and responsible member of the international community at UN as a mate in New York.
Yeah. Now, Clifford Aguegosi says, Nigeria must take advantage of the 72nd session to push her value proposition and value expectation.
From Badamasi Adamo is this tweet. What inspired me was the call for democratization of the United Nations to curb the scourge and instability in Africa.
Now, Festus Akimboewa says, I hope 72nd session of UNGA will not be another talk show. Time for action and let's talk.
Oh, Festus continues in another tweet. United Nations General Assembly is a celebration of the UN's birthday. Hope the champagne will not be too intoxicating so that issues common people face can be discussed.
Now, we didn't take a Clifford Aguegosi here, who says that I'm happy Ambassador Saraki alluded to conditions that lower the dignity of people, such as that obnoxious policy engendered.
And from Abdullahi Onusabi is this tweet. Our participation in UN is very important and strategic. Owing to our significant position in Africa, we must make meaningful contribution. Well, those are some of the tweets that have come in the meantime. Now, let's take a look at another area that is of interest to Nigeria. Repatriation of looted funds stashed in foreign countries. It's easier for people, for them to actually bring back the looters, but the funds are not coming. How should Nigeria press home this point this time around?
Well, this is also part of the what I earlier referred to as advocacy and engagement. One of the pillars of Mr. President's policies when he came into office is the anti-corruption drive. And that entails both the drive to curb corruption, eliminate it internally, and also engage with other actors outside in terms of repatriation of illegally transferred funds. And if you recall, the former president of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, chaired a commission established by the African Union to look into the issue of financial illegal flight of capital from Africa. And I think, huge, percentage of the hemorrhage of capital in Africa comes from actually Nigeria. So it is the legitimate expectation of the Nigerian government and people to stress on this issue that the world must repatriate and return what is illegally taken out of our countries. The problem here is the legal intricacies and obstacles that you have to surmount in order to get other countries to recognize your claim on funds that have left your shores. That is one. But the important thing is we have experience. During, when I was in Geneva, and Ambassador Joseph Ayalogo was my ambassador, and then also Ambassador Martin were there. We engaged with the Swiss government to agree to return some of the monies that were taken out from Nigeria by a previous administration. That was a successful example of engagement with other countries. The United Nations itself has a definite position on corruption and repatriation of funds. What we need to do is to leverage those existing policies and standpoints in the UN in order to engage first and foremost with the major countries where we suspect capital flight usually goes into, and then to understand the nuances and mechanisms, particularly the legal and other issues involved in terms of the repatriation of capital. If we do so successfully, we will have now established the moral ground and claim on which this can be returned. And if you look finally on this issue, the Sustainable Development Goals that we negotiated in New York in 2014 and adopted in 2015, the issue of corruption was central. And Nigeria actually led the African group to include the fight against corruption as a critical issue of the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think that is what we can stress and leverage to obtain a facility and understanding for the repatriation of funds.
Those funds. Okay, thank you. Let me return to you in Benin, Ambassador Keshi. It is, from all indications, it's becoming so difficult to secure these looted funds stashed in different parts of the world by Nigerian government. Now, in the light of this, what will you be advocating with respect to what Nigeria should do to see how these funds can be returned to this nation?
And Blessing, you will recall that we've had conversation on this a couple of times. And I've always taken two positions. Number one, from the other side. I've always felt that even what we are requesting for to be repatriated back to us is we are shortchanging ourselves, because the money looted has been invested and those guys have made a lot of money from it. My position is that they should return the money plus the interest to us, number one. You can say that's on the lighter side, but I'm very serious on that. But the more fundamental issue for me is this. Remember how long we've been going after the Abuja loot. It's over more than 20 years, and we've not been able to recover all the money. There are a lot of legal complications. But I think some of these legal complications we can actually resolve them if we begin to do the right thing, beginning from how we pursue and champion some of these causes domestically. Our legal system. You know, it's not enough to publish all the time what has been taken out without doing the proper legal work itself. It's when you do the proper legal work, you strengthen your position to be able to make a case, you know, across the border. The second thing is that this thing has to be more strongly on a bilateral level and consistently. And sometimes also, I believe we should begin to think of taking legal actions, because you cannot admit that these monies are there and nobody is prepared to repatriate them. Meanwhile, those who hold that money, they are trading with it. And the other point that, again, I should end with is to say that even as we speak, money is still going out to some parts of the nation, I mean to some parts of the world, which means that we need to do more work at home. Look at the system itself that allows this flow. If you begin to look at the system, you might actually be able to prevent a lot of more money going out than fighting for the ones you've been fighting for over 20 years. You've not been able to secure anything. So let's begin to look domestically at home and to say, look, can we plug the loopholes? Can we reduce the waste in the system that have allowed so much money to flow out of the country? And there are so many ways I believe that this can be done if we really task ourselves to begin to say, okay, we can't get some of this money back as urgently as we want them, but can we ensure that we put a stop to the flow? But we are complaining that money is out there, more money is still going out. It doesn't make sense to me, to be candid.
All right, Ambassador Joe Keshi, thank you very much. We must go now. Just briefly from Professor Abu, these two cases, could there be mere international power play in getting our money back?
No, not necessarily. I think Ambassador Keshi put it very well. First of all, there's diplomacy at the diplomatic level, which is political, which you have to engage in And then there are the technicalities, which is rightly spoke to, about managing it well at the local level and then taking it international. But by and large, being able to achieve anything tangible in terms of repatriation of these stolen funds, we have to be at the bilateral level. Once we're able to identify the countries where these monies have been taken to, you engage diplomatically and politically at that level, making sure that you understand the technicalities. Then and it's not a one thing. It is an ongoing process. And so it's not something that you just start off and you get it immediately. And we need to understand that. It reminds me of the days of former President Olusegun Obasanjo, when we did the debt diplomacy, in which we are actually able to get a lot of our debts, over 20.something billion,
so it requires a lot of
diplomacy and negotiations.
And diplomatic negotiation. Talk shop and negotiation. Now, Usman Saraki, Ambassador, your last thoughts on this briefly, please.
Well, thank you. I agree with you that diplomacy is very critical in advocating and getting some results, getting traction out of this. But it's going to be a very long, drawn-out, battle because of vested interests. Once monies go out, they are being used. They don't just stay dormant; they are being used. So those who are using that money, they have to be engaged with, effectively, and that is where diplomacy comes in. I think it's very important for the federal government to build the capacity of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs through adequate funding, adequate empowerment in many areas in order for it to effectively canvass Nigeria's position, engage with those that are principally involved in retaining our money outside, and as my boss, Ambassador Keshi, said, also perfect our mechanisms for interdicting the flow of money outside. So it's very important that we have a collaborative venture both inside and outside the country.
Ambassador Usman Saraki, former Deputy Permanent Representative of Nigeria to the United Nations, we'd like to thank you for joining us on the program this morning.
Thank you.
We wish you well. We also like to appreciate Ambassador Joe Keshi, former Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It was a great delight. And as usual, having you on the program. Good morning, Nigeria. We also like to thank Professor Oshita Abu, head of Professor of International Relations at the Bayes University and formerly also at Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. Thank you very much for joining us on the program this morning. Okay, to our companion segment, Kirian?
Yeah, there's Nigerian home-based Super Eagles advanced into Waffle Cup of Nations tournament following victory over Ghana, just as a sports administrator calls for more focus on grassroots development to discover fresh talents. Now let's join our sports desk for details of the